Even though there technically were video games before this, the first mass-produced video game was Atari's Pong. It was a simple game where two players were to hit a ball and try to get it out of bounds on their opponent's side. While this was very successful in sales, a lot of people wanted to play it at their homes, as opposed to going to an arcade to play. This mindset forced Atari to come up with a way for people to plug the game into their TVs at home, so they created the Atari 2600. By 1982, roughly 8 million American homes owned a video game console, and the home video game industry was generating an annual revenue of $3.8 billion. Everything seemed to be going great. People were buying games at an incredible rate, and any developer could make the next big game. But while this seems all fine and dandy, this actually was the industry's downfall. By the time the early 80s came about, every successful game that came out had potentially dozens of badly made rip-offs, and in this process consumers had a hard time finding quality games. Game sales all around fell, and these bad games were not exclusive to small developers. Atari was getting a track record of making rushed, badly made games, such as the Atari 2600 version of Pac-Man, due to it being rushed and overhyped. And another 2600 game, the much-hyped game version of the film E.T., which was a colossal failure on every level and, almost single-handedly, made Atari go bankrupt. This caused the North American game industry as a whole to decline majorly and is known as the video game crash of 1983. At this point in time, a lot of people considered video game consoles a fad and assumed PCs were the future. Consoles, for a while, became somewhat irrelevant. And it wasn't until a Japanese electronic company named Nintendo came into the picture with their third-generation console, the Nintendo Entertainment System, also known as the NES. Coming out in North America in 1985, this system not only had hit games made directly from Nintendo, such as Mario and Metroid, but also any third-party game released on the NES had to get certified directly by Nintendo if they wanted to sell on that console. This fixed many problems the industry faced and put gaming consoles, and even the video game industry, back on track. Around this time, playing video games on a PC, even though PCs at this time were almost exclusively made for businesses, was starting to get traction. PCs at this time were much more powerful than games, and could even do basic 3D games well before any console could. But in 1993, their popularity would take off with smash hits like Myst and Doom, both selling over 10 million copies in their lifetime, causing a huge surge in popularity in PC gaming. From the late 80s to early 90s, Nintendo was teaming up with Japanese consumer electronic maker Sony to help create games on CDs. Nintendo ended up breaking off this relationship, however, which resulted in Sony making their own video game console called PlayStation. PlayStation ended up being hugely successful for Sony and completely beat the Nintendo 64, which was its competing console in sales. At this time, the home console market was dominated by three Japanese companies, Sony, Nintendo, and Sega, with no American console even on the market. This was until OS maker Microsoft released the Xbox in 2002, which was a moderate success but spawned the much more successful Xbox 360. At present day, there pretty much are only three remaining hardware makers, Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft, with Sega only making software due to the failure of the Dreamcast, and PC gaming being larger in yearly revenue than it ever has before. Video games are not slowing down either. Future technologies, such as the Oculus Rift, can potentially change the way we experience games and perceive video games visually. Things like this will generate even more excitement in the industry and potentially make it bigger than ever.